Indiana Jones and the Great Circle is a tough game to put a one-word descriptive summary to. Where I would describe Ghost of Tsushima or Hi-Fi Rush as exceptional, the same can't be said of Henry Jones Jr.'s latest game. Whereby I would use the word avoid on games like Starfield or Assassin's Creed Valhalla, I cannot attribute that same word to the Great Circle. To describe my feelings on Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, I'm going to need more than just a singular word. There are some provisos, some nuance, some huge joy and huge annoyance to discuss. So, we may as well get started. The reason I find this game so hard to swiftly describe is that there are tally marks in both the good and bad columns. An example of good is the visuals. No matter where I played, be that a handheld PC, the cloud, or a console, the game looked really good. Speaking with a friend about the game, he described its visuals as the new Crysis, which overpowered many a PC back in the day. High visual praise indeed. But on the bad side, there was no AMD FSR support in the game at launch or over 3 weeks later. This wouldn't be too bad, except for the fact that the core of the Xbox Series consoles is AMD graphics cards. Not building appropriately for your own platform feels like a large miss. Performance was a tally mark in both columns. Sometimes the gameplay was fast, flawless, and with beautifully smooth frame rates. Other times, such as in this clip here, the performance was so bad that the game was unplayable. Less than a frame per second, huge input lag on native hardware, visual ghosting and broken sounds that were painful to the ear. Sometimes these positive and negative scenarios were seconds apart from one another within the same play session. There's a lot to discuss on either side of the fence here, and aspects will be addressed and elaborated on throughout the video. But let's now dive into what is probably the most important question. Having rolled credits on the game, what were my immediate thoughts? I was mostly satisfied, but I had some large complaints too. I loved the story. It had its down points, sure, and depending on the type of story you like, can definitely detract from the experience for a lot of people. But for me, as a whole, I found the narrative rather engaging. Sitting apparently between Raiders and The Last Crusade, so the first and third movies, this story actually offers a more rounded Indiana than I feel we have ever seen on the big screen. The characterization is beautiful. From outlining Indy's selfishness that costs him so much in a strong light, through to his inherently caring nature. The tale takes us from that iconic boulder scene in the first movie, acting as a tutorial here, through to Indy's college, to Il Vaticano, to Giza, Shanghai, and beyond. All the while evolving the Indiana Jones character while staying true to the character's core. Staying true to a character in a new tale like this is a task that is often hard to achieve with existing IPs. You need only look at properties like The Witcher to see the struggles I speak of. In the show, after a fantastically accurate Season 1, they created a tale completely departed from the source material for Season 2, assassinating many of the characters and story beats along the way that pushed the narrative forward. That then hampered them returning to the canon narrative for Season 3. These choices chased their star, and the draw for many people to the series, Henry Cavill, away. The Harry Potter movies butchered many characters and plots as another example. There was the Tom Cruise Jack Reacher movies, which seriously missed the mark. In gaming, you have both Gotham Knights and Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League in the last 24 months that have no idea about DC Comics characters and how they would act. And then there are hundreds more across multiple mediums that don't do justice to the existing and known characters. But here, very much like the CW's Superman and Lois show, which truly understood and honoured the core of the characters while telling new and interesting stories, The Great Circle understands the Indiana Jones character, can place him in new experiences and new environments, then evolve that character in ways not seen before, and still remain true to the core of what is known of him from the other stories the character has appeared in. That is a difficult feat to achieve, but the writing team at Machine Games absolutely nailed it with The Great Circle. When you then add in the genius of indie with ancient languages, the smarts and ability to listen to other viewpoints, science fiction and biblical fantasy, and a globe-trotting adventure that the original trilogy was known for, it makes this game's narrative one of my favourite Indiana Jones stories, full stop. There is a challenge with that narrative though, and that is the gameplay required to get to it. It's totally serviceable in the broad strokes. By that, I mean that more than half of the time it is fully working, and I'll address that statement in more depth shortly. It adds gameplay in and around the cutscene narrative moments that then work to transport the player from one story beat to the next. What the gameplay isn't, however, is engaging, especially compared to the engagement felt in the story. Everything is simple here. Very simple stealth as one example. You crouch to be quiet, you sneak outside their cone of vision, you sneak up behind them and then silently take them out. Like, it does work, but there's no challenge with it, even on higher difficulties. In addition, that stealth approach just feels so un-Indiana Jones to me. I remember there was sneaking in the movies to get into places, but then it's fistfights, squabbles over artifacts, guns instead of swords, and the infamous whip. Now, all of these things are in the game, but they're so unbalanced and so badly made that using them actively hinders your experience. I can empty a full clip from my revolver into a Nazi as one example, and he won't die. But one bullet from him, and I crash to the game over screen. I have to punch one guy for 17 minutes straight with the worst melee combat controls I think I've ever encountered, and animation locks that will cause game over, whereas 3 hits for them result in game over for me. The whip and the grab are on the same button, so regularly Indy does the opposite of what you want him to do, entering you once more into a combat scenario that just feels awful to play, which when you are either trying to push someone off a ledge or climb up something further, just accentuate the anger the player is already feeling. It's all made worse by nothing changing from the start of the game to the end of the game, and that causes multiple additional challenges. My biggest challenge throughout this entire game, no matter what other issues or foibles I encountered, was sheer boredom with what I was doing. There's multiple recordings of my gameplay that are less than 30 minutes in length. This wasn't a time constraint. I didn't get called away or caught up in something else. It's because I was bored of playing the game. The gameplay in every region is so samey, so identical to what came before, that actually playing the game for more than 30 minutes at a time felt like a chore to me. Something I had to do to get to more of the excellent story. The story was so good that I did want to sit through the chore of playing to get to it. But that balance of gameplay to story is so off until late game that quitting long before the credits or just watching a supercut on YouTube is a legitimate and understandable option, and comments like "it should have been a movie" make more sense. It puts the Great Circle at an odd dichotomy with itself. On the one hand, I wanted nothing more than to keep playing the game to get more of the enticing, engaging, and exciting story. On the other hand, the act of actually accessing that story via the gameplay was repetitive, disengaging, and outright boring on multiple occasions. And that's before we talk about bugs, glitches, and issues with the game, which are unfortunately rampant throughout the Great Circle. In the tutorial, in fact, I got this lovely graphical glitch the first time we actually see Indy's face. This is a game with some of the best graphics of the year here, folks, according to Digital Foundry. This kind of feels like it spells disaster for the industry if this is the best that we're able to get. In this same clip, you can see that every single change of camera angle, or gameplay to cutscene and cutscene to gameplay, has a visible, noticeable pause before switching. Every single time, every single platform, without fail. It's not a good look. It's jarring to the eyes, stunts the flow of the gameplay and narrative, and can cause motion sickness that is on par with virtual reality. The extreme performance swings are also jarring. It can go from this, lovely smooth gameplay, to this, chugging mess in the same set piece. In fact, this is the same set piece that went from really smooth and enjoyable to nigh unplayable. But then with the same sudden change as before, it switches back to nice smooth gameplay thereafter. I spent ages on my device playing around with game and system settings, trying to get the game to run well all of the time. But even with all recommended settings, then turning things on and off, adjusting strengths, lowering resolutions and graphical fidelity and so on, the issues persisted even into a second playthrough. But those adjustments are only possible to mess with and adjust because I'm playing on a PC. The cloud and console versions don't have that option available to them, and if the game decides not to work that day, that's your lot. I had one of those moments in the Nephilim boss fight in Giza. I was playing over the cloud at this point, and suddenly button inputs weren't working. I couldn't crouch, block, or dodge. 3 button inputs that simply did not work and were vital to this boss fight. So I had to switch back to hardware for this boss fight where the input worked, no worries. I thought this was the standard awfulness of Xbox cloud gaming, which seems to actually get worse year on year. But then I experienced the same and even worse issues on hardware, making this a game-specific issue. This video shows that worse issue, an issue that became more and more prominent as the game progressed. Under normal circumstances, B is the crouch button in game. But here, for some untold reason, it suddenly opens the pause menu like the start button instead. The L2 or LT trigger, for some reason, rather than punching or aiming your weapon as it should, now acts like right on the D-pad, while A, X and Y do absolutely nothing. This particular version of this bug happened after 45 minutes of game time. Those 45 minutes were gameplay as you'd expect. Then suddenly, the game wouldn't understand what the inputs were, even though it had been understanding them less than 10 seconds earlier. And for those already typing away, because they can see I'm on an Ally here, yes, the Ally was on gamepad mode during all of these input challenges. On each occasion, a quick shutdown and restart of the game, and I was back to playing. But this wasn't a one-off scenario. It occurred on game startup, after a period of gameplay, just after cutscenes, mid-frantic combat. It even occurred in the final boss fight. Hence, I have this cutscene twice because I needed to reload the game and sit through it again. Though the second did have AMD's fluid motion frames too after a firmware update, and looked so much better and smoother for it, so I'll take the small wins. There's more too, all of a similar vein. And it means the tally marks in the negatives column extend far beyond the positives. Sitting down and writing this script has allowed me to come to the realization that, for me, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle is a great, great narrative. It is superbly written, acted, and directed. Then it is animated expertly and wrapped in gorgeous visuals. But that is about where the positives stop for me. There is some fun to be had in moments of the gameplay. There are memorable moments and set pieces, and I would stop long before calling it bad or unusable, except in those glitch moments. But there is a descriptive term that regularly springs to mind while playing the game, and I think the descriptor of boring, for the act of actually playing the title, is maybe worse than just being straight up and down bad. For an aspect of a piece of art to be boring, it has to fail to elicit any emotions, positive or negative, within a person. And that's very much how the Great Circle gameplay left me feeling. The other emotion I felt throughout and can be used as a descriptor for the game is annoying. Annoyance at the bugs, annoyance at the performance, annoyance at the design choices. Like, why, for example, is ray tracing required for this game? A technology that actively hampers performance for a visual buff that doesn't even look that good, or is even noticeable to the vast majority of players. For some reason, it's required for this game. Why? Alongside Indy, I've been replaying The Prince of Persia: The Forgotten Sands. This game came out in 2010 and looks fantastic still. The graphics are gorgeous, involved, and look great in motion. That motion is at a minimum 60 frames per second on an ASUS ROG Ally. On that playthrough, it averaged 93 frames per second. There's no ray tracing, no path tracing, and the mods that add such things make the game look and perform actively worse. It's the same for indie. And for it, I'd recommend getting rid of the ray tracing, or at least give the players the option to turn it off. The game would run better, be purchasable and playable by a wider demographic, and allow developers time to actually add a decent HDR setting that users do actually notice, especially when the differences are this great in SDR and HDR. But, and this comment may shock a lot of people after everything that I have said in this review, I actually love Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, and would definitely recommend it if you can run it. It is nowhere near perfect, far from a masterpiece, and a definite mess of a title. All those 10 out of 10 scores make me question what illegal substances or company payrolls the reviewers were on. Objectively, from my experience across 3 different platforms, it's a middling mess at best. That being said though, it is my favourite mess of 2024. Not my favourite game, that title belongs to Astrobot or Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. But something about indie just hits right for me. That boring and repetitive gameplay actually makes it the perfect dip in and out game. I could play 20 minutes on a lunch break and be satisfied. It works really well for the story and also for the side quests. Okay, the side quests are mostly nonsense, pretty terrible, and more often than not detract from the main story. They could definitely have been cut, and the game would not have been impacted by said cut. But as something to do after rolling credits, it means I can dip in, fully complete one, feel satisfied, and move on. The story speaks to a nostalgia in me, despite being completely new, that many movies and games simply fail to tap into by chasing the latest trends. The narrative is original, full, cohesive, and well characterized, which are also missing features across many other mediums. And while I do have complaints and gripes, and they are not small in quantity or impact, the few positives that are here, for me, are so strong that the challenges, weaknesses, downright dumb decisions, and every other detractor to this title can be dealt with, because the highs are just that powerful and satisfying. I recommend Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, with the proviso of knowing what you're getting into with the frustrations that the game brings. For me, now, I'm going to go finish my second playthrough, with many more frames on the Ally, and hope that it's even better on the PlayStation 5 with a later release and DualSense implementation. This video was produced after rolling credits on Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, played via Game Pass Ultimate. The Game Pass Ultimate subscription was purchased and paid for personally by Doragon. Neither Bethesda, Machine Games, Microsoft, nor Xbox know that this video is being made. They do not get any copy approval or early preview of its contents. If they do see it, they will see it for the first time right alongside you. I would like to thank you all so much for tuning in. If you've liked this video, I think these will also be of interest to you. In the meantime, my name is Doragon. You can find me on Threads at Doragon86 or in the Discord in the description. And until next time, folks, have yourselves a fantastic day. And take care.